We are at the Welcome to 1979 cutting and mastering room here in Nashville. The studios where I've been working with Salim. And I'm going to show you how they make records, how they prepare records to be pressed. So we're going to go and meet Cameron in the cutting and mastering room. Here he is. This is Cameron.
Hello.
Now, what we have here is a lathe and an acetate disc, which is basically an aluminium disc, or aluminum as they say in America, which is lacquered. We call them lacquers or acetates. And this disc is being cut. One of the most interesting things about it is you'll see this little pipe here. That is being helium cooled. And if you look in here, this is the helium.
That's my helium stash.
That's the helium stash. So this is being helium cooled, and you'll notice that the disc is larger than vinyl. It's usually 14 inches to cut a 12-inch disc. And what can you tell us about it, Cameron? Anything that we need to know?
Yeah, so you can see, if you can see where the lockout is of the 12-inch disc and the leading grooves, and now it's just cutting the music in real time. So I liken it to golf. I've hit the ball, and I'm just waiting to see where it lands.
Right.
You know, so I'll be able to look at it under the microscope when I'm finished and see if it looks like it sounds good.
All right. So looking through this microscope here at the grooves tells you if it's even or something. Is that
I can make sure the grooves aren't like running into each other, or that there aren't any sudden movements in the groove that might cause a playback issue, like a skip or a jump or a ramp.
Because that has happened, isn't it? They've pressed records before which have had a skip or a jump in them. Then the whole batch has a skip or a jump.
Yeah.
Everything will have it.
Yeah, so I try to catch things early. Obviously, I can't listen to these because they're really soft, which makes them great for cutting the music, but terrible for retaining that information when a playback needle hits it. So this lacquer won't get played. It'll get sprayed with silver upstairs and stuck into a nickel plating bath, and after an hour or two, you'll peel the metal off and have a metal negative of a record that'll have ridges instead of grooves. And then that can go to a pressing plant and get put into a giant press, the A side on the bottom and the B side on top or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'll just stamp out records like waffles.
Wow.
You know, it's a big complicated waffle iron, a record press.
Yeah.
And so they'll make a few copies, listen to them, and if they have a skip, they'll listen on the other one. If there's a skip in the same place, then they'll know there's a problem with the way the disc was cut, or a damage to the stamp or whatever. But if you have a problem in one and not another, then it's just an anomaly.
It's just an anomaly, right?
You know, a pop or a tick or whatever.
Right. And another couple of interesting things here. This is a German machine made by, I'll try and say it in German for Olivia's sake. It's Georg Neumann. And it's about 45 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like a piece of fantastically delicate and precise engineering, right?
It looks like what they would build for the movie set for like Spaceballs, for the command center of their spaceship. Yeah, big glowing buttons and dials and knobs.
Right. And this platter here that the lacquer is on top of, you notice it has, well, I don't know if you can see this as it's moving, but it has grooves in it. And those grooves are there for a reason. There's a vacuum that's activated which pulls the lacquer down and holds it straight so that it can't ever slip while the record is being cut. It's a very delicate piece of engineering, and
the vacuum has two purposes. There's a jar under here that has what looks like a purple hair.
Oh,
but
what is that?
It's a bit of lacquer that's coming right off of the cutting stylus that's being sucked into a little tube and ends up down there. We call it chip in the United States, but in the UK they call it swarf. And I've kind of started calling it swarf because that's a way better word.
Okay, swarf.
So the swarf gets caught in the swarf jar.
Yeah.
And if that suction wasn't there, like the older lathes, that stuff would just pile up on the record. You'd have to brush it away, and it would make the records noisier. because that stuff gets stuck in the grooves.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's sucking up the excess that's being cut away.
Right. And what's the industry standard about how long a side of a vinyl LP should be?
It's a moving target, but 20 minutes is the good average. It's all dependent on what's going on musically.
Oh, right, because if it's denser or louder?
Yeah, I mean, if it has a lot of bass, the groove's going to move more, and so the grooves have to be spaced out further. And so you can only fit so much time at a specific volume.
Right.
You know, I can cut 40 minutes of silence on a disc.
Ah, that's interesting.
You know, but
so an ambient record could be longer.
Could be, or an acoustic vocal record could be really long.
Okay.
I think the longest record I ever cut was about 29 minutes, and it was a vocal and guitar, and it fit fine. You know, sometimes I get 17-minute hip hop records that are really hard to get to fit because of the low end.
And that's why dance records are often on 12-inch singles, because they have heavy bass.
And they're also cut at 45 RPM. So the faster the revolutions per minute, the more gradual the groove is. So it's actually easier for your playback needle to play back a groove that's moving by at a faster speed. It seems like it would be the opposite. But the faster the disc is moving, the more gradual the groove is for the needle. So you can get away with more low end, more stereo imaging, more sibilance, more all that stuff on a 12-inch 45 than you can on a standard LP.
Okay, and as a man that has 50,000 records, and
what's your favorite one?
Oh, it's probably something by the Beatles. You know, I'm from Liverpool, and
it's not a bad thing to have.
You know, but I have a question which you could advise the watchers with. How often should you change your needle?
You know, your playback needle.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a specific time that I really do. Usually I can hear when it starts to go.
Yeah.
Myself, but I don't have
distorts, right?
I usually hear distortion, or I'll get like a level bump. You'll hear like it start to get louder before it dies, which I've noticed before. The left and right channels will get on the balance sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure what the time is for it.
Like,
usually you know.
Yeah, you know.
If something's not right.
Yeah, I remember in the 70s when you bought albums, when you bought needles, you could buy a diamond or a sapphire.
Sure.
And the sapphire was the cheaper one. And I've decided to get a diamond,
The sapphire is cheaper, but it wears out.
Yes, right.
Sapphire is still used for cutting style. This one's a ruby.
Yeah.
But we don't use diamonds for cutting stylus because, although it's more robust, it's too grainy, and you can't get the tight burnishing facets on a diamond that are required for cutting. So we still use rubies and sapphires, so they have to get changed out quite often.
And are they expensive? I mean, a ruby isn't that expensive?
It's 120 a stylus.
Right.
They get about 15 to 25 cutting hours per stylus. So I go through them every few weeks. Put a new one on.
Yeah. And what else? I mean, the smell. They smell different, don't they?
Yeah, they have a good
smell really good. Can I touch one of these?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are scraps.
These are scraps. Okay.
I mean, I love the smell.
Would you like to smell this with me, Cameron?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It smells like crayons. Or crowns. How do you say crayons?
Crayons. No, we say crayons. We
Okay.
say crayons. Yeah. Look at that. See, so that's one. Has that been a test for somebody?
This was a test that probably had some kind of flaw.
Right.
So when there's a bad lacquer, sometimes it happens. I just sit them around to use as show and tell, or I can do test cutting on the back of it.
Right. Okay. So that's what it looks like when it comes out of the cardboard box.
Minus the fingerprints.
Oh, minus the fingerprints.
Yeah, they come out really clean.
Yeah, they look really beautiful, don't they, when they come out? They look like something in a contemporary artist's apartment.
It's like a black mirror.
Like a black mirror.
Yeah.
It's like a black mirror, yeah.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's really smooth.
Yeah.
And there's really, really, they have to be extremely perfect. So any imperfection in the lacquer makes it relatively useless unless it's occurring, where the center label would be or with the other edges. So.
Yeah. And what about, I don't know if you know about this, but what about cleaning your records if you have a record collection? What do you advise for that?
I've got one of those Audio Quest brushes that have the really, really fine, and those seem to do a really good job.
Yeah.
I've never gone down the road of like testing different like actual cleaners.
Yeah.
But
I have a record cleaning machine.
yeah, which one do you have?
It's called a Moth.
Okay.
And it's from England, and it was really expensive.
Okay.
And I've seen them since. I got it a long time ago.
Does it work well?
Yeah, I've got it as a present. It works really well. But what it does is it's got a vacuum in it, and you put 5 to 1 of distilled water and isopropyl alcohol, and then you put it on the disc, and then you turn it over, and you press a button, and it spins round, and it sucks
all that stuff out.
Because somebody told me, I can't remember who it was, that one of the problems with old vinyl is not only is it covered in years of dirt and dust and all this stuff, but dandruff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of
Leaning
30
over
years of people leaning over records, putting them on and off.
Yeah.
And all that gets into the grooves. And one of the things about a record cleaning machine is it takes all that out, which you can't do by just brushing it or wiping it or washing it or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is that obviously if it's a scratch, you can't remove the scratch, but you can certainly remove a lot of noise and dirt and clicks and things by using one of those machines.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a cheaper version that does something similar, and it seems to work pretty well too.
Yeah.
But I use I've never used isopropyl alcohol. I've always just used distilled water.
Yeah.
And then kind of scrub it.
Yeah.
And then let it vacuum it off.
Yeah.
But
I think
that's kind of the fun of owning records.
Yeah.
Like the funny, like I'm asked all the time, like, does it sound better, or all those, like, is it better questions? And it's like, it's not really the point, I don't think. It's the format that has seen the birth and death of everything else that was supposed to replace it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so, like, that's kind of validation in itself. And I remember when CDs came out, they were like, these don't wear down like records do. Like they will always be perfect.
Yeah.
And the reality is they're not. Like we have you can go down the street to the record store and buy something that was made 30 years ago.
Yeah.
For $1 that's destroyed, and it'll still play music. It'll just be noisy.
Yeah.
But you can't even find CDs from 10 years ago in used stores because they're scratched and they're useless. Like if you keep a CD in pristine condition, sure, but you touch it, and it's ruined.
Yeah, yeah.
So records have way more longevity than that medium.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the thing. Like it's not so much about the quality. Yeah. For some people, it's the experience.
Yeah,
of it, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, the experience.
I have a ton of records I love listening to that are just beat to hell.
Right.
But I still listen to them, and that's kind of part of it. That's the way my records sound.
But where do you stand when it comes to vinyl versus CD as audio quality? I mean, do you believe this thing about vinyl sounds so much better?
I don't know. Like, I think there are CDs that sound really good. I think there are CDs that sound really bad. I think there are records that sound really good. I think there are records that sound really bad.
Yeah, because they started bad here, right? Yeah. And that could be anything that's mastered or cut badly.
Both of them have their own set of limitations.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, like just the people that worked on it and the powers that be, like had engineers or mastering engineers, whatever, destroy things, you know?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I was talking with another mastering engineer about cutting records in the 70s, and he's like, you get these major label projects sound amazing, and they would put it on the crappiest turntable, and if it skipped, they'd say, take the bass off, because all they cared about was not getting shit returned to them.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, like, when you hear a lot of these old records, people are like, they don't skip on my toy turntable, but my new record does, and it's like, well, because there's no bass on those old records, and if you listen, they kind of don't sometimes.
Right.
But sometimes they do. You know?
But I've got my copy of with the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's like it's made of something else, and it's scratched. But I put it on, and it still
sounds
powers.
Really good.
The music powers out of it. You know.
Yeah.
It sounds fantastic.
Was this an original pressing?
Yeah, an original pressing. You know.
Yeah.
the music powers out of it, despite it having marks on it and, you know, everything, you know.
Yeah, so. And like, yeah, I mean, you know, it's making records is like an artisan craft that used to be, when it was the primary format, that's how things went. I mean, this was a pressing plant originally, and we've met over the years some guys that worked here, you know, and they were like, we press a record, we pressed 2,000 copies before we were happy with the way it sounded and throw them away, because they were making 1 million of them. But that doesn't make sense in today's world.
Wow, that's so...
they're only making 500 records or something. Yeah.
Wow.
We found out the Grease soundtrack was pressed in this building.
Oh, really?
And apparently for like nothing, they did nothing but press Grease records for 1.5 years. Like this entire warehouse.
Really?
Just pressed. I mean, so it just kind of gives you the scope. Like, I don't know if there's, I don't know the real numbers, but like maybe in the heyday of vinyl, they would have, you know, in a pressing plant, they might have 20 presses.
Yeah.
And each one of those presses would be pressing one record for maybe a week or two.
Yeah.
Nowadays, those same 20 presses are pressing 2 or 3 bands a day.
Right.
You know, there's no like large run stuff, so they're just pressing probably the same amount of volume, but way more artists at smaller scale. So it just changed a bit.
Yeah.
But the artisanship is coming back. Like all these people are coming back and have relearned how to press records really well. Like some small startup kind of companies where it's like owner operated. So quality is really important to them.
Like a truck, owner operated.
Yeah. Or like a microbrewery. You know, there's like there are pressing plants that are basically the Budweiser of record pressing. Like you'll get drunk and it doesn't cost a lot of money. The quality's not great, but it'll get you there. And then there are some places that are like, if you want to have like an experience, like this is the good record, you know, this is like a whole experience they're selling with the way they press records. And I work with a lot of those places because that's kind of how I am too.
Wow, great. And how many of these machines have survived?
I don't know. I'd say there's probably 20 or 25 of them in the United States, and that might actually be a high number, but and then the level of how well they're functioning, that number dwindles and dwindles, so not very many.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure about the UK, but there's you know, that's still a small number in itself.
Yeah, sure. And how many were there in the heyday of manufacturing
I've heard
records?
that they made 300 of them.
Ah, well that's not that many, is it?
No.
300.
Yeah.
Wow.
But when vinyl kind of died, everybody sold theirs for nothing.
For nothing, yeah.
They went to the hip-hop guys that were cutting dub plates in their studio, like the DJs for scratching. So a lot of them ended up in those kind of places where they were heavily used. But
okay, thanks Cameron.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Great to talk to somebody about
I feel like
this
I'm
stuff.
on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Okay. All right.